Welcome to Just a Dude podcast, where we dive into the lives of extraordinary individuals who have turned their life's challenges into stepping stones for success. I'm your host, Nathan, and today we've got an episode that's all about transformation, creativity, and beating the odds. So grab your favorite beverage, sit back, and join us as we explore the journey from heart attacks to humor. Let's get started. Today, we have the pleasure of hosting someone who has truly turned his life around in the most inspiring way. He's a motivational speaker, a master of stress management, and a beacon of creativity in the world of personal development. After surviving a heart attack, he decided to live life to the fullest, using his experiences to lighten up the lives of others. Please welcome the man who blends humor with wisdom, the author of Great Things Happen Every Day, and his newest book, Fry Your Chickens. He's also the innovator behind Rubber Chicken QR codes. Please welcome Mr. Phil Barth. Phil, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Nathan. Glad to be here.
Yeah, thank you, Phil. I really appreciate you coming on to talk about really your life with our listeners and show how, we can make some extraordinary things out of normal folks. But yeah, what would you like the audience to know about yourself, a little bit about your background?
So I think the background is I talk about stress management. And unfortunately, the extraordinary thing that happened to me was I had a heart attack in my early 50s, which I was not terribly overweight, not terribly out of shape, no smoking, etc. Diet was okay.
Yeah.
But the doctor afterwards, it was a small heart attack. And I said, if this is small, I don't ever want to see a medium.
You're right.
But the doctor said, you need to manage your stress. And when I looked at it, I realized that I was a stress junkie. I really was. I was one of those people who'd say, well, I could still make it to the airport in another if I take off in another 5 minutes and drive like crazy and so on and so on. Unnecessary stress in a variety of areas. And we'll talk more about that. But what I did was, first thing was I had to learn what stress really was. And I looked for books on Amazon, and most of the titles had these people like pulling their hair out. And I said, I don't want a book that stresses me out just by looking at the cover.
Yeah, exactly. Why would you want a book that's going to stress you out when you're learning how to deal with stress, right?
What the doctor made me promise was 1 week out of every 3 months, I would unplug, just take time off of work. And I said I would. And my wife was in the room. So that became a binding contract.
Yep. I know how that is. Once our wives hear it, it's binding. No ifs, ands, or buts.
Exactly. So heart attack in March. December, I started going back to work full-time back in January. And on the last week of March, my wife said, it's been 3 months. So it's time to take a week off. I was still going through the rehab and all that. So we just said, we're going to take a staycation. What happened was we took the first day, we went to the Cincinnati Zoo with our youngest son. And at the end of the day, I got on Facebook. I said, hey, here were the great things that happened today, just on a whim. And, we saw a baby cheetah and we saw the gorilla exhibit. We had a picnic lunch in the car and so on. And I got a bunch of likes on Facebook. And, if you get likes on Facebook, that's the dream, right? That's why
Heck yeah, you feel good about it, right?
And so I said, I'm going to try that again tomorrow. So the next day we went to the art museum and I posted it and I got likes. And so as the week's going on and I'm on vacation, I thought, I wonder how long I could do this. And the answer is it's almost been 10 years.
Wow. Yeah.
Not every single day, but almost every single day. It's just finding the good that happens in life. And ultimately I wrote a book about it, taking all of those things and turning them into themes and talking about the stories and what I've learned from this, in the hopes that other people will see how to kind of rewire their brain for positivity and avoid the heart attack, basically.
Yeah. And listen, we can all take that kind of advice, because I think that's one thing none of us want to have is a heart attack.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And especially, you said you were 50, Phil, when that happened?
Early 50s, yes.
Yeah. Yeah. And so my dad had a heart attack when he was 48. And yeah, so I'm freaking out. I'm like five years away from that. But, luckily I'm in a little bit better shape than he was at the time. So.
And we didn't have family history. That was the other thing. I mean, yeah, we have family history, but it's after people turn 85. That doesn't count. No, we didn't have family history of anybody having a heart attack in their 50s. And for a period of time, I went through the whole why me? There's somebody who smokes, there's somebody who weighs more than I do. And the answer is I had a heart attack because of stress. And once I started learning to manage stress, things got a lot better.
Yeah, and I don't think people realize how much of a toll that stress takes on your life. The things that it can do to you, like a heart attack, cause you to lose lack of sleep, or lack of sleep can cause additional stress, right? It's like a double-edged sword there. And so yeah, being at such a young age in your early 50s, which I think is a young age, and to
It,
have a stress-induced heart attack, that's got to get you thinking and make you turn your life around a little bit, right, Phil?
it did. It did. It absolutely did. And the more I read about stress and the impacts it has on people's health, it's a silent killer. Only maybe it's not so silent anymore. But
Right.
I mean, it can lead to dementia. It can lead to diabetes. It just so many things. It's just those hormones in your brain it's so important to channel the positive ones, and so important to not overload on the negative ones. That's basically what I've been doing
Yeah,
for
and you
10 years now.
Yeah, and Phil, stress is definitely a universal problem, right? I mean, it can hit anybody regardless of your, gender, your, age, sex, it doesn't matter, right? Stress is an equal opportunity annoyer.
It truly is. And you know many many thousands of years ago it served us well when we could get eaten by an animal. Then you needed stress.
Exactly.
That's a tiger. Or a dire wolf, which I just hear we're bringing back, but that's another story for another day. Right? There's stress that served us then, but it doesn't serve us now. And more importantly, there is a lot of optional stress that we put
Oh
ourselves
yeah.
through that we don't need to do. And it's turning on the news. It's going on Facebook to argue with people who don't think the same thing we think. It's all of those sorts of things that does absolutely no good. And when I talk to people, I have the 9 S's of successful stress management. And one of them is to subtract the amount of bad in your life.
Hmm.
Don't go looking for arguments. Don't unnecessarily watch the news. Don't, get caught up in all the negativity that's out there, but instead find something positive.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know what? It's funny that you brought up social media, because I noticed a few months back, I was doing the same thing. I was going on and I was looking for those things that, kind of get you hyped up a little bit, get your blood boiling. And then I said, what the heck am I doing this for? What is the point of that? Because in the end, it's not, number one, it's not going to make a difference arguing with somebody, most likely, especially on Facebook.
Never.
Number two, it's not going to accomplish anything. So even if I was arguing to accomplish something with somebody that I don't know, it's not going to make a difference. So yeah, why add that extra stress to your life?
Oh yeah, yeah, I agree. I block a lot of people. Some of them I might even agree with. It doesn't matter. It's just they're saying things in a negative way, so I block them. And I tell Facebook, show me less of this. That way, I get to see more of my niece and her husband and their 2 young kids, and more of other family members sharing pictures and more positivity.
Yep. No, I agree with you, and I think a lot of us could probably take a note from your book on that one.
Right.
Yeah, just to stick with the positive things.
Yeah.
Now, Phil, you're like, you've done a lot with stress. You've obviously read a lot about it and looked at things, but what are some of your key strategies that you teach for managing stress?
So I call them the 9 S's, and we'll see how good I am if I can remember all 9. I can tell you the first one is what I call seek the green or seek the good. And when I do a keynote, I have everybody close their eyes, and I say, I want you to think about the color green. Just and for 10, 15 seconds, we think about the color green. It could be a tree, grass, money, whatever your green is. And then I have them open their eyes, and on screen is a whole screen full of different colored dots. And where were your eyes drawn? Well, they were drawn to the green because that's what you put in your head.
Yep.
And if you think about it, you're more likely, if it was just a pure random looking at it, to be drawn to yellow or red, something bright, something that gets your attention, like red lights. That's why they're red. And that's why yellow is a flashing to warn you. Having put green in your head, that's what you find. And it goes back to a long time ago. Scientific American did a study or released the results on what's called the brain's reticular activation system. And that's what it's saying is whatever you put in your head, that's what you're going to find. And and it still happens. And it happened to me today. My wife and I were out driving, and we got at the end of last year, we got a dark red Honda. And so now I'm looking, and every time in the parking lot, is that ours? Is that ours? Because I said to her, I said, I can't believe the number of dark red Hondas. And then I looked out on the road and there were white cars. It's just, that's what's in your mind.
You know what, Phil? That is exactly what my mind went to when you said that. Cause I was like, it's just like when you get a new car, right? And you're like, for me, when I bought a truck, I bought a Toyota Tacoma, and yeah, I noticed them every now and then. But once you buy one, you're like, oh, wow, look, there's one, there's one, there's one. And you're like, wait, why am I noticing these all of a sudden? But yeah, that's exactly it.
That's what it is. And so if you program your brain to look for what's bad, your brain's like, oh, that's what you want. Here, I'll give you more arguments on Facebook. I'll give you more bad. If, on the other hand, you program your brain to find out what is good, it's going to give you more of it. So that's the whole basis of my personal experiment that I didn't know was an experiment with Facebook, where I was encouraging the good and looking for the good so I could post it on Facebook. The more I looked, the easier it became to find, and the more difficult it became to find the bad optional negative things. So that's the big one that I tell people, is to seek the green or the good.
Yeah, it's almost, yeah, essentially just seeking a positive mindset.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I like that.
And I can tell you the second one right off the top of my head.
All right.
It's subtract the bad. So if green was good and red is bad, and again, I got a red car and I've got some red rubber chickens around here. I like the color red, but just for the sake of argument, red represents the other side of that. And you subtract. And we've talked about that. The optional negativity, the things on social media, the things on television, anything that's going to put you in the wrong frame of mind. I tell people on Facebook, you can block people. And they don't even know they're blocked. And wouldn't it be great if we could do that in real life? Somebody negative, we just blocked, and they didn't know they were blocked. And the other thing I like to talk about is, if you know a negative person, do you want to hang out with them? Like, you got a negative person at work. Hey, let's invite them to lunch so they can complain about the service and the food and the cost. And you don't.
Yeah, usually you're saying, hey, let's, so-and-so, don't let them know we're going to lunch.
Exactly. So why would you invite them in on your television screen, your computer monitor, etc.? And I call it subtract the bad. You cannot eliminate the bad in your life. Bad things are going to happen. It's just subtracting the optional.
Yeah, the things you could control, right?
Yes, exactly. What you can control, subtract the bad. And it sounds so simple, but it works so well.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, I've even noticed some of that in my life just the past couple of months, by subtracting some of those bad things and trying to take that positive mindset. Just those two things can make your life, incredibly better.
Yes, makes a huge difference. Now I'm going to geek out on you for a minute here.
Let's do it.
Now, I am, by my original trade, which I've retired, an IT geek. And so I'm also a little bit geeked out, I'll admit it, by ChatGPT and a few of those other tools. And I have friends saying, did you not watch the movie The Terminator? And I have other friends.
Exactly. That's what my wife says. And I actually work in AI, Phil. So I know how it is, because my wife's like, aren't you afraid that it's going to escape? And I'm like, no, because we put guardrails around it, but.
Exactly. Then I'm not going to tell you anything you don't know, probably. But what I did was, last year, I downloaded all of my posts from Facebook 1 year at a time. I've been on Facebook for, 17 years, something like that. So I downloaded them all, and then I fed them one at a time. There was some massaging I needed to do. Fed them one at a time into ChatGPT. And I said, I want you to count how many were positive, how many are negative. Give me the percentage. Positive, negative, neutral. So before the heart attack and before I started all this, it was about 4-1 positive, which is not bad. I mean, that's 3-1 is considered a break even. 4-1 is good. After the heart attack, in any given year, 10 to 15-1.
Wow.
Positive to negative. Yeah. And so I've got the data. It made a huge difference. The other thing was, it wasn't like, it's a numerator denominator thing, right? The negative number stayed about the same, because you're going to have traffic jams, lousy service, et cetera, that make their way out to Facebook. But there were less neutral and a lot more positive posts. And
yeah, that's pretty cool that you had that idea to take it and load it into ChatGPT and say, hey, look for these patterns for me and see, what it was. And when you first said, 4-1, I was like, well, that's not bad. 4-1, that's not, but then 15 to 20 to 1, that's a heck of a lot better in my book.
Yeah, I haven't done LinkedIn yet, and I would like to figure out emails too, although maybe I don't want to. I don't know.
Yeah, you might want to stop it there at LinkedIn, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, truthfully, we're in an era, and I know this wasn't supposed to be an AI podcast, but we're in an era where you really shouldn't have to put out a negative email because you could run it through something first. And
Yeah.
I have said, look, I am really pissed off about this, and this is the problem. But I want you to here's the story. Here's what I want to send them. Make it professional.
And you know what, Phil? I've been doing the same exact thing because I have a tendency when I'm working, because I stay focused in work, So when I'm working, I have a tendency to be very straight and to the point, not a lot of fluff and things like that. Well, I've found in my lifetime that people sometimes take that negatively, which I don't know why you would. It's an email, but, so what I do is I take my sentence, or whatever I'm going to email out, I put it in the chat GPT and I say, can you make sure that this has a positive tone to it and reword it so that it's understand, things like that. And it's
Exactly.
amazing what it does for you. Now everybody thinks I'm nice, and I've just been refeeding everything through Chat GPT.
Well, and if you think about it, before COVID, we were all face to face a lot more often.
Yeah.
And so we would have this interaction. And if I were to say something that you were like, wait a minute, what'd you mean? I'd say, no, I didn't mean that. But if it's an
Exactly.
email, it's like, holy cow, and it gets escalated. So this is kind of a way to bring that back down.
Yeah, and if you think about it, when we write emails, there's no tone inflected in the writing whatsoever. But depending on the mood you're having for that day, you can take an email as positive or negative,
Yes.
or neutral, like you said. And so, yeah, it is weird to see that, we could do those things with AI to make it a little bit more positive and actually get good positive feedback from our coworkers. In this case, for me anyway.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, so that I don't know how we got there, other than we're two geeks
Oh,
talking
we were
about it.
talking, yeah, we were talking negative and positive, but yeah,
Yeah,
we're just,
so yeah, those are the first two is seek the green or the good, subtract the bad or the red. And I tell people what happens when you can't subtract anymore. Then I say when you can't subtract, add, which ADD, acknowledge, don't dwell. So there is a time, to everything there is a season, turn.
yep.
There is a time when you have bad things and there has to be a period of grief, and so you acknowledge that, you honor it, but then you have to move on. And
Yep.
each person, however long they have to go through some sort of grieving process for whatever the issue is different. But understand that there are ways to deal with that, and I have a couple of other ones in the big nine that talk about
Yeah.
that.
I mean, that's just a great start to talk about how you work with things in your life and how you deal with these stress. And I mean, just those first three is a huge, big step. For anyone out there that's listening and has stress in their life, which I'm going to assume is everybody. I know it's bad to assume things, but I'm pretty sure we all have stress.
We do, and I think we have more stress now than ever. So
Yeah.
this is more
Well,
critical than it's ever been.
and Phil, let me go back a little bit too. When you think about it, when you and I were growing up, this stuff wasn't in our face every single second of the day. We didn't have cell phones in our pockets and social media accounts. And, we had the newspaper, maybe the nightly news on TV, and that was about it.
Yeah.
But now, I mean, these new generations, I don't even know how they deal with it in a normal everyday pattern.
No, and maybe that needs to be another S for 10. Maybe is set aside the social media and cell phone and just get outside and walk.
Yeah. Disconnect.
Disconnect. Yeah.
Just like your doctor told you once, once every 3 months, take a week off. And I think that's a great thing for everybody. Even if it's like once a month, just take a day and put the electronics away and just enjoy yourself.
Go outside.
Exactly.
Finding more and more about the benefits of getting out, getting a little sunshine, and we've always known it's good, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yep, exactly. And then, so Phil, a lot of your stress management and, a lot of this came from your heart attack, but it not only did it lead you to try to reduce stress, but it kind of made you a little creative as well along the way, right?
Right.
So can you tell us some things? Like, I know I was reading your website about the quirky methods for innovation, like the rubber chicken QR codes.
Yes. Please. Yeah, there he is. There he is.
There it is.
That is my business card.
I love that.
So you hit the QR code that takes you to my website, and one of the things I talk about is we're always and the phone has made it worse, right? That the squirrel, right? But every once in a while, there's a squirrel that you got to follow. And so it was a while ago that I was working on getting a QR code for my website. And I went to Chrome and they put the little T-Rex in the middle of the QR code.
Yeah.
And I said, there's no way that is actually required for it. So I took a little tiny picture of a yellow rubber chicken, put it over the middle, and I had a rubber chicken in the middle of a QR code, and it worked. And so, again, this is following that little squirrel. And then I said, no, wait a minute. If I could put a rubber chicken on a QR code, why couldn't I put a QR code on a rubber chicken?
Rubber chicken.
And
yeah.
So, yeah, I get these in bulk from Amazon. I wish they had subscribe and save.
Yeah, no kidding, right? Because they give you a little bit cheaper price.
I mean, it's like less than 30 cents a rubber chicken. And what I do is I have a label printer and hooked it up to the computer and just print strings of labels. And then my son or my wife and I, you cut them up and just put a little dot of super glue, put them on. So before I go to a conference, I'm spending a little time. And then you got
you got a production line with you and your wife and your kids and just say, okay, here's this one next, right?
Exactly. And sometimes there's a defective one and that gets thrown on the floor and the dogs get it. So
well, see, it's a win-win for everybody. Yeah. I like that.
Or I take their head off. Hang on. I take the head off.
I love that. Phil, how did you come up with the rubber chicken? How did that get into your life?
So the original, this is even pre-heart attack. One of my original speeches that I gave, I've been in Toastmasters for a number of years, and annually they have the World Championship of Public Speaking. And so in 2011, I entered the contest. I entered it every year, and I had been developing a keynote on project management of all things. And the contest deadline's coming up, and I'm like, I don't know. And so I went through my keynote. I was like, okay, here's one point that I like for my keynote, and it's ask for help as a project manager. Don't you? And I was like, okay, so let's talk about a story where I got up the courage to ask. And it was asking my then friend, now wife, for that first date. And so then it's all of those chickens that are inside of you. And I said, I didn't have rubber chickens at the time, but they're all inside of you saying, oh, she's out of your league, you're a geek, and so on. And it really resonated well. I made it all the way to the finals. So 25,000 people started speaking. I was in the final 9 with that story. And people could relate to it, right? I'm not talking about and that's why I love this podcast, by the way. It's not talking about the time you climb Mount Everest. It's about the time I asked somebody out on a date.
Yeah.
It worked, and it's still working. So that started the chickens. And it was a few years later that I had gotten a lot of play on that, both inside and outside of where I work. I was down at a conference at work in Memphis. And all of a sudden, the guy who's putting on the conference got up and played the video of my speech. And he said, and by the way, he's here in the audience today. And I came down. He said, come down. We got something for you, Phil. And he gave me a rubber chicken. And I was like, cool.
Yeah.
And so I took it home and I had it on my trophy shelf for a while. And then my 2 oldest sons are in a heavy metal band. And they said, can we borrow your rubber chicken? I was like, yeah, sure. And so they had it on the cymbals of the drums for a while. And then next thing you know, they did a video and there's the rubber chicken in the video. And everybody's loving the rubber chicken. And this isn't that rubber chicken, but it's a very good likeness, very similar. And so suddenly I realized that would be really cool to have that thing squeaking as I'm telling the story and telling the other stories about the fear and the negativities that stress you out and hold you back. From there, it became, let's find little ones and turn them into a business card, toss them out to the audience and, representations of what happens when you fry them. And then my favorite one is the red rooster of regret. And this is what I tell people is like, whatever you're worried about, whatever those voices are inside of you, the worst one, the one you really have to fear is regret from not doing something. And that's the whole story behind not asking my wife out and not taking chances in other areas of my life. The regret would have been worse than being told no or whatever. And just do a quick one. So,
and that's about how it feels too when you have that regret, isn't it? It sounds just like it feels.
And it can go 45 seconds. And so I'll have somebody from the audience squeeze it. And he goes, 15, 20 seconds. And I say, that was bad, right? And everybody's like, yeah, it was. Not as bad as being regrets at the end of your life because you didn't try something. You didn't
Yeah.
pursue something.
And that's a great point because I think a lot of us, like you said, occasionally will get those chickens inside of us, which is right where you're going. And we have to learn how to overcome those, or at least, embrace it to a way to where we don't have that regret.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I still get them. And you'd think, oh well, you know what? I got that date with my wife, but you still, oh, I don't want to do that. And you know, if I say something like that, my wife goes, "Yeah, I heard this speaker once saying that you need to step out of your comfort zone and fry your chickens." I'm like, "Oh, thank you for using my words against me. Now I have to do whatever it was I was debating."
Yeah, exactly. And and that's so with the rubber chickens, how has the impact been or feedback been that you've received from folks on that?
Overwhelmingly positive. I won't say 100% positive. You're never going to please everyone.
Well, no, yeah, you can't, right? What's the old adage, right? You could some of the people some of the time, but not all the
Yeah,
people. So
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, exactly. And I had one of my events, I got some negative feedback, and I looked into it. And I was like, at the same event, somebody said this was the greatest keynote I've ever been to, and so on. And I was like, okay, if I had played to eliminate that negative feedback, I wouldn't have been up here with the rubber chickens and everything
Exactly.
else. I'd been down here. So
Yep.
but yeah, people love it. And I set it up ahead of time. I will go to the people in the back of the room. Look, I'm going to be coming in this way. You're going to be the first table I see. If I toss you a rubber chicken, will you stand up and catch it and not act like I'm 30? Oh, I'm under
Yeah.
35, right? You do that with one or two tables, and then everybody's like, "Give me one." And so you're tossing out rubber chickens. Everybody's up, they're moving. Later in the keynote, we do a chicken dance.
Yeah.
Music is from my sons, the heavy metal experts. It's the heavy metal chicken dance.
Oh, that's I want to hear that. You'll have to send that to me, Phil, or tell me where I can go to hear it. I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, yeah, well, while we're talking, I might be able to pull up a real quick snippet of it. But yeah, and it's just a huge experience where you are committing to your big, bold, brilliant idea. And this is the best part. This makes my day when it happens. It's happened a couple times. I had somebody come up to me and said, "I heard you last year." So they came up to me in 2024. "I heard you at a conference in 2023. And I had a big, bold, brilliant idea. It was my idea. I said I wanted to enter and keep going until I won a beach volleyball tournament. And I did it." And I'm like, that is so cool.
Yeah.
That is so cool. That was her big, bold, brilliant idea. And she did it. Like, this is awesome.
Yeah,
So,
it's like you're really encouraging folks to get out of their comfort zone and
yeah.
really go after these
Oh,
things.
wow. It worked. Yeah. To me, it's like, oh, wow. Yeah, it worked. I'm going to have to send it to you, bud.
Yeah, that's fine. No worries. I just was super interested to hear the heavy metal version of the chicken dance.
I'll play it here. Okay. I'll send you
I
the
like
whole
it.
thing.
No, I love that.
He did such a good job on it. And I was in a little over a year ago. I was in this competition where it was like a, a parody of beauty pageants, for lack of a better term. And so I said, well, I'm going to come out with a chicken dance. And I was in lederhosen with a big stein. I'm throwing chickens to the audience. And my sons were playing the heavy metal song, but clearly I had to practice it. And I mean, I practiced for 2 months. And so I'm down here in the basement in lederhosen doing that dance, playing the music at the cranked up. And every time I cranked it up, the dogs would come running down because they wanted to dance with me. And I was a little surprised. I kept it short. I was a little surprised we didn't have dogs coming down here to they just
That's
want
funny.
to be part of it.
That's awesome. Too bad you couldn't take the dogs with you to your competition, right? That would have been, yeah. That I would have been all over that. I got dogs here at the house too, and yeah, if I can include them, I will. But that would have been funny. Phil dancing with the chickens and the dogs.
Well, yeah, they're just like, oh wow, we get to play. I love dogs. Well, and that's another one. We're going to very successfully loop this back to stress. I tell people to start their day off with positivity. And well, let's step back for the science. Sean Acor and his wife Michelle Galeen did a study, and for you and anybody on there, Sean Acor TED Talk. He's got like 4 million hits. Hilarious and really, really good on positivity. But they did a study and they broke the participants into two groups. The first group was given 3 minutes of negative news to start the day, which probably just means they turned on the news, right?
Yeah,
The
probably
other,
just everyday news, right?
the other one was 3 minutes of solution focused news. So not like all positive, but solution focused. At the end of the day, they asked people, how was your day? The people who started with 3 minutes first thing of bad news were 27% more likely to report having a bad day.
Wow. Yeah, that's higher than I thought it would have been.
they were blown away. And when I read that, I was like, I need a positive morning routine every morning. And so mine is, and this is start your day off right. A, B, C, D. So A is some positive affirmations, and they rotate. They come up on my phone. I'm going to make some people laugh today. The world is going to be a better place because I tried really hard, etc. B is a book, something positive. I read the Bible in the morning. If you don't like the Bible, something positive, something that connects you to positivity. C is coffee, because I only get 2 cups of coffee now that I've had the stents put in. So I
Yeah,
make it good. And D is dogs. And D is probably the most important one. And I tell people I want to be a dog when I grow up, because they wake up and you know what? They haven't seen me for 8 hours. And they're like, oh, you're so wonderful. I missed you so much. Right. And you feed them dog food. And they're like, oh, this is delicious. Thank you so much. I love you. I lost a bet with my son and had to eat a piece of dog food. Spoiler alert, it sucks.
yeah,
But they love it, right? And everything is so positive, and they get up on my lap, and they are such positive creatures. And so when I start with them, good cup of coffee, some reading, and affirmations, I'm on my way to having a positive day. And it depends how long the dogs want to hang out. It doesn't take
sure.
minutes.
Yeah, and that's a great way to start your day and start it every day because if you're starting it positive, you're probably, 20 times more likely to have a better day.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the dogs aren't going to really let me start it negative, I suppose.
No, they don't the only way they start it negative is if you wake up to them throwing up or something like that.
It's happened.
It has. Yeah, I'm sure that's why I said it. Every dog owner's probably
Yeah, oh,
experienced it at
yeah.
least once.
I
But
have I have many times that I love dogs, but they are gross.
yes, they are.
So yeah, you start the day positive. That's a big one that has made such a dramatic change in my life. And I got to give credit to the dogs.
Yeah, I do too because, we've had dogs in my life since I've been married with my wife and I mean, I don't think I can think of a time we didn't have at least one dog. And at some point we had 4, which let me tell you, I do not recommend because you are definitely outnumbered.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So, but no, dogs are great and you're right, that's a great way to start the day off and that's probably why my days start off pretty positive most days too. And I'm sure if you have cats, you might have the same, but I've heard cats have their own personality, so they do what they want to do.
We have had cats in the past. I like cats, but they're not going to like go, oh, I'm so glad to see you. It's like, oh, you're here. Okay, feed me.
Yeah. Now, Phil, I have a question for you. I want to ask you this, see if it's true. Were you on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire?
I was on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. Yes.
And are you a millionaire?
I did not win $1 million on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. No, I won $32,000 on Who Wants to Be a
Oh,
Millionaire.
wow. That's more than I've won.
So, so yeah, that one plays into that was stressful, by the way.
Oh, I'm sure. Oh, my gosh. Yeah. You want to talk about eliminating stress. That was probably not the way to do it, Phil.
Yeah. But that's one of my keynotes is called "Fry Your Chickens." Those chickens inside of you, and that was 2+ years of pursuing the dream, and learning how to audition for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, and passing an audition, and then getting on the show and getting $32,000, which
Yeah.
was a really cool experience.
I have to assume the government took a good share of that.
So you're considered, yes, yes and no. You are considered a non-contract employee. They send you a check for $32,000 after the show airs.
And then you're responsible for income taxes.
Responsible, yeah. And I made friends with the lady who was on right before me, and she won $64,000 and had
Oh,
to deal
wow.
with quarterly income tax. There are worse problems to deal with.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess so. And you know what? I guess I wouldn't mind having that problem to deal with, Hey, but now the work to get up to it though, I mean, that had to be did you have to do like a lot of studying or,
Yeah.
what?
So I cut it into multiple pieces. Number one, when you first started out, it was a phone in audition, right? So you would answer questions fastest on the phone, would get through, and then you would, if you were one of the fastest, you had another shot in a random draw. And so 10 people every night they ran the phone game. 10 people were going to make it onto the show. 200,000 were calling in.
Oh, wow.
1 in 20,000, right? So the chickens are like, you're not that good,
Yeah, right.
right? So I never made it to the show that way. So then they started doing in-person auditions. I flew to Chicago for an in-person. You had to land a spot on the phone. I did. Flew to Chicago and failed. And so about a month or two later, I got a spot in Indianapolis, which I'm in Cincinnati, by the way.
Okay. So I'm in Akron, just so you know.
Oh, okay.
We're both in Ohio. So, I was going to ask you later because I heard Cincinnati Zoo and I was like, Phil's got to be in Ohio.
Yeah,
Either that or Kentucky.
Grew up in Martlet, right up on the lake. So before you and I talked today, I was watching the Cleveland opening game. So very happy.
Yeah.
At any rate, so I drove to Indianapolis, a couple hours, and auditioned. Same deal, didn't make it. And so then after that, I said, all right, what am I doing wrong? If I keep auditioning the same way, I'm guaranteed to keep failing the same way. So I said, if I passed a Who Wants to Be a Millionaire audition, I would probably be bragging out on the internet. And so I started looking, and I found somebody talking about how he passed the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire audition. And so what he did, two things he did. Number one, by the way, it's a 2-part audition. They give you a test, multiple choice, just like on the show. And the questions were questions they already had on the show. And I had watched every single episode.
So you knew a bunch of the answers. Nice.
I knew a bunch of the answers. And then if you got a certain number right, then you went into the interviews where you would talk with the producer. And you would fill out a form before you would talk to the producer. And so the first thing is they give you a number 2 pencil with your form to fill out. And the guy said, I didn't use that. He took 4-color pen, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I sit down in Cleveland. By the way, that's the other part. The audition I passed was in Cleveland, Ohio. Drove up.
Hey, there we go.
Passed it. All right. But I had a 4-color pen and a highlighter and a red marker and so on. And I put it all down. And the guy sitting next to me looks at all my writing equipment, looks at his little number 2 pencil, looks at me and says, well, you can figure it out, right? So the second thing I learned was don't answer the questions like it's an English test or a history test. Get your story to fit in there somewhere. So what I did was I found a couple of stories that I thought would play well because they want to hear a story that they can imagine you telling Meredith Vieira in between questions. At the time, it was Meredith Vieira. And so I found those, put them in red ink, circled them with a yellow highlighter. When the producer saw it, that's what he wanted to talk about. We talked, and I got a little card, you're in the show, because I was able to tell the story I needed to get in front of the producer. And told several. The story I wanted to get in front of him was my son was 5 at the time, my oldest. And he was sitting next to me one night and I'm watching Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. And the host at the time, Regis Philbin, said, okay, coming up in the hot seat, next in the hot seat. And my son got this look on his face. He goes, Daddy, how hot do they make that hot seat? and so I told that to Meredith Vieira and she goes, so how your buns doing right now? I tell people, very few people have ever had Meredith Vieira ask them about their buns on Who Wants to Be.
Yeah, exactly. Especially if you're not married to her in a relationship, right?
I'm not Mr. Vieira. You still want to know about my bun? Okay.
Exactly. That's funny.
So yeah, that's what got me on. And the funny postscript to all of this was I was watching, I was visiting my mom a while ago. She likes watching game shows. And I saw the executive producer for a game show. And I was like, holy cow, that's the dude who interviewed me for Who Wants to Be a Millionaire. I recognize the name. So I went out to LinkedIn. He was a second level connection. I just shot him a message. I said, hey, just wanted to say all those years ago, Who Wants to Be a Millionaire? Thanks again. I'm sure you don't remember me. I'm glad to see you're doing well. He sent a message back. We got on the phone and talked for an hour. It was the coolest
That's cool.
thing. And he told all these Regis Philbin stories and it was just so cool. We just I talked about Millionaire and he talked about his career and we just went back and forth and I talked about public speaking. You want to know a little bit about that? But yeah, I have no idea where I was going with that, but
no, that's all right. I just wanted to know about your experience. But, speaking of public speaking, you're also an author, right? And so your book is Lighten Up to Level Up.
No, sorry.
No. Okay. Sorry.
That is an AI flub. That is my new keynote that I'm working on.
Okay.
The book is called Great Things Happen Every Day. And that was the basis of that. And then the other book that is it's going to be released May of this year, May and Kindle, June 1st for paperback, is called Fry Your Chickens. And it's that whole story of, ignoring those voices inside of you that stress you out, that tell you you can't be on Who Wants to Be a Millionaire, that you will not be successful when you ask for a date, that you can't ride a roller coaster after age 50, all of those things that the chickens inside of you are trying to keep you from doing. It talks about
Mhm.
how to do it, how to shut those voices down and basically live the life you were meant to live.
So this is really your books are really there to help inspire or lead people towards a less stressful life and the opportunity to live a better life.
Percent. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the joke is I tell people I'm an international best sort of selling author because everybody, right, there are like what, as many books as there are on Amazon. I think there are a category for each one, so everybody can be a bestseller in some category. Nobody's looking at you going, oh, you must be Stephen King.
You
So
don't have to worry about wearing disguises when you go out.
no, exactly. I'm not John Grisham either. I tell people that I'm a best sort of selling author because when we put the first book, the Great Things Happen Every Day book, out there on the as a Kindle book, we hit the socials first off and said, "Hey, this book's going to be free. Grab a copy of it." And so it went to number one on the bestseller list for Kindle books about stress management that were free.
Yeah, right.
Seriously, there were four in the category, and mine was number one.
It's still number one.
Well,
That's the way I look at it, right?
right. But the question is, if you sell, and it was a couple thousand copies, but if you sell thousands of copies and get $0, is that really a sale?
Yeah. Well, it's a good point.
My bank says no. So that's why I call it the best sort of selling book.
Yeah, I say yes because those books went out to people, but you're right. Your bank account is going to say, no, Phil, I didn't see anything.
And that's the point is I didn't do it to get the $1 million. I would have been happy with $1 million or even
Sure.
$32,000 from the book. But the whole idea was to get that book in the hands of people who needed to learn how to be more optimistic, how to be happier. And the feedback I've gotten from people is it helps. And that's what I wanted.
Yeah, that's awesome. And with the speeches that you go around and give, or your talks, are these mostly focused around like motivation and personal development?
Yeah.
Okay.
So the number one topic is the fry your chickens goal achievement. The close second is the stress management one, and the 9S is the stress management. And there's so much overlap, right? Because in either case, you've got these things inside of you that are telling you can't do it, you need to be stressed, and so on. The difference is probably that the stress one has, it's not just these guys, it's also everybody on the outside that's trying to
Yeah.
stress you out. So
Yeah. And
those are the
And that
top.
was something I wanted to ask you about, Phil, just for our listeners, because we talked about some of the stresses that we can control, and how to do, like getting rid of some of the Facebook stuff, not watching the news, starting your day off on a positive note. But is there any advice you would give to our listeners for those stresses that maybe you can't control and maybe how they could deal with those?
So that's a couple things. Number one, that's where I talk about acknowledge, don't dwell. You cannot sit there and ignore every stress. And there are things that are going to happen to you that are out of your control that you just have to acknowledge. You can't be a Pollyanna. There are times to work through it. And I would never tell anybody, oh, you shouldn't mourn this or you shouldn't deal with this negativity. You have to. You absolutely have to. One of the things that I talk about is uh, oh gosh, it's been about 6 years ago. My father passed away, and it was after a long battle with dementia and so on.
Mm.
And he lived to a ripe old age. They, went through the process and then actually attended the service. And then the next day, I had to fly to Canada. And so I get there. It's we're on the Pacific time zone. I crash and burn, and then about 4 in the morning, I wake up and it suddenly hits me. It's like Dad is gone, and I know he's better off now. I know the
Yeah.
struggle is done. All of the issues that he was going through are done, but now there's a hole. And so what do I do? And so I was laying there. I was like, well, you know what? I'm up, and they have a 24-hour fitness center. So I went down and hit the treadmill, put in my earbuds, and said play Waylon Jennings. And the reason I picked that was because that was my dad liked country and western, and I liked on country and western maybe Johnny Cash and Waylon Jennings, and not a whole lot more. But that's where we met in the middle, right? So when I'm listening to Waylon Jennings now, it's not all the things I was going through at the end of Dad's life. It's, Dad is taking his 2 young kids and Mom to Disney, right? We're on a road trip and we're listening to Waylon Jennings. And so it takes you back to that positive time. As far as the hormones go in your brain, you're there. And so you're counteracting some of the negativity. Is there still a loss there? Of course. And you still work through that. But sometimes music can take you back, and sometimes just going back to a happy memory helps. Now, what I say is actually the place I went was in northern Canada. It was freezing. I said, so the going back to the past is like northern Canada. It's a nice place to visit, but I don't want to live there.
You don't want to live there. Yeah, exactly. I say the same thing about Ohio, though. No,
No,
only
you're
in the
not
winter
wrong.
time, though. Only
You're
in the winter
not
time.
wrong. No.
I talk to my wife all the time. I say, I'm ready to move out of state. And she's always like, no. And I said, she goes, wait until May, you'll be fine. So, and it is true. It's true. It's that once May comes, May through November, essentially, we're fine. But then once winter hits, I'm up here in the Akron area. So we get the lake effect snow too, which makes it even worse.
Yep.
But yeah,
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, exactly. You know exactly what I'm talking about.
Wow.
You're probably one of my only guests that may know the how we can have several seasons in one day in Ohio.
Absolutely.
Yesterday, Phil, it started here. It was like fall in the morning at about 38 to 40 degrees. Then it went up to 67 degrees. So we saw spring. Then it went back to fall, and then it started snowing. So I was like, okay, welcome to Ohio.
We had the same basic thing.
Yeah. And you're just like
layering on more clothes and more clothes.
Yep. And then 2 days from now, it'll be 85 degrees. So no, I don't know if it will be, but you know what I mean? That's just how it is here.
That's how it is.
But there's one of those stresses that we can't control.
Yeah. No, you just layer up or layer down. See, I'm
Exactly.
back in hockey jerseys now. I love it. I don't root for any particular hockey. If I had known you were Akron, I would have probably worn my Cleveland Monsters hockey jersey.
Oh yeah, I am a huge hockey fan. I'm a, Monsters hockey. We used to have season tickets. I'd drive 2 hours to Columbus, once or twice a week, which is, let me tell you, that gets old quick.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I believe that. Yeah. And so I'm, unlike all the other sports, I can just watch hockey and enjoy hockey for hockey.
I love it no matter who's playing.
Right. So and jerseys are cool. This particular one is the Orlando Solar Bears. And
cool.
Because nothing.
Are they AHL?
Central Florida. I don't know. I was in Orlando.
And just happened to see it. That's awesome, though. No, because I know there's so many different leagues nowadays that, it could be anything. But yeah, I'm glad man, we live in Ohio. We like hockey. I don't know. It feels like this was meant to be, Phil. So, Phil, what do you have coming up? I know you said you got your new book coming out in May. And what's the name of that book again?
Fry Your Chickens.
Fry Your Chickens. And Fry Your Chickens will come out in May, and that's going to be on Amazon, right, as a Kindle ebook. And then in June?
Yes, and then it's going to be released 1st of June, and should be on, I guess it's going to be on Amazon, I think Target.com. I'm not sure where else yet.
So you got the book. Any other speaking engagements or anything like that coming up for you?
Yeah, I am. Well, when's this going to air? By the time this airs, I will have spoken in. I got Toronto end of this month, and then Orlando, and then we are doing a European tour that
nice.
I get to go to. I get to speak in Amsterdam and then in Antwerp, Belgium. And my wife and son are coming with me.
Nice.
And then they're coming home, and I'm going back over to speak in Prague a week later.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it just happened to come up, and there was no way my wife, with the commitment she had and my son with the commitments he had, could stay the
whole thing.
Yeah, the whole thing. And then I got DC in June.
Nice.
This is like one of my favorite times of the year because they do all the conferences in the nice weather.
Yeah.
And they're usually at very nice places. Last year I got to take my wife and youngest to Orlando when I spoke there. The year before I took my son and daughter-in-law to Orlando to speak when I spoke, and my middle son and wife to DC. So it's like you get to go and do what you love, but at the same time you get to take a vacation and hang out with your family. And it's
exactly. It's funny because my wife's got a trip in June to Nashville for work. And I'm like, you know what? They're paying for the hotel room. I'm just going to tag along. I work remotely anyway, so I'll just work from the hotel room and then we'll enjoy Nashville in the evening.
Absolutely.
So
absolutely.
I'm
Yeah.
like, heck, she's already going anyway, and might as well go with her. So, Phil, is there anything else that you want to let the audience know about or talk about?
So, so one of the things I thought of one other S, and I thought of it because I've got a note on the. You can't see it. I'll send you a picture of it. A note on the lower. I've got a whiteboard behind me because I'm a whiteboard geek.
Well, yeah, me too. I've got one right over here. So,
So this goes back a number of years that my wife wrote "Love You" with a little heart on it, and it's been there ever since. So I will clean the entire whiteboard except for that little spot down in the lower left hand corner, and in the idea is share the
yeah.
love with someone else, and it doesn't have to be your wife. It could just be, say something nice to somebody you meet in the street, hold the door for somebody, but whatever, just do something nice for somebody else, and don't do it for them, do it for you, because you're going to feel better.
Yep. Yeah. It's just something as simple as holding the door open for someone. Because you're right. I was taught that way, especially if a lady's coming in or someone that might be older than me. I'm always going to hold the door open. But that's something so simple that you could do that not only could be a positive influence on that stranger's life, but your own as well.
So yeah, just share the love with others. Where a lot of times we like to, and if you're listening to this podcast, I'm preaching to the choir, right? The people who probably need to hear this aren't listening to it, but
Right.
but a lot of times we just want to throw sticks and stones at somebody with a different opinion. I have to remind myself that people who have a different opinion are not inherently bad.
No.
Probably, I know people that have different opinions from me that are very smart and well reasoned, well thought out people that probably came to their opinions for very good reasons. And so I'm not going to exclude them from my life. I'm not going to yell at them because I would be missing out on some really good people and good experiences. So I always try to look for the good in the other people. P.S. This is a good way to use Chat GPT. If you have a strong belief about something, put it in Chat GPT and say, please play the other side and tell me why I'm wrong. Do it
Oh,
nicely.
yeah.
And I've done that. I was like, okay, so what is the other side thinking with this? And you're like, ooh. It doesn't mean I've changed my mind, but it's like, okay.
Yeah, and you know what, Phil? I've been doing the same thing because when I originally started the show, I thought I was going to talk mostly about politics, and that switched. And mostly because I didn't want to be one-sided. And, I tend to lean to the right, but I like to hear everybody's opinion because the number one thing that I know, and trust me, my wife tells me this, I am not always right. So, but so it's kind of changed. And I have people on the show with differing opinions because I want to learn, right? What is behind your opinion? Your thoughts on this? What brings you up? Because there might be something I'm totally missing.
Yeah. And and that's the key, is to be able to recognize that there are two different sides to every story, and to be able to hold both of those in your mind and not just say, well, you think that way, you're wrong, I'm going to shut you out. That you're missing a lot of the human experience and adding unnecessary stress to your life.
Absolutely. That's what I was going to go back to, that stress part, right? And even if you focus, let's say you and I talk, right? And just for an example, and let's say we have totally different opinions on politics, and we know that we can still be friends without talking about politics, right? We
Absolutely.
know that it might be a sore issue for us, but let's not let that ruin a friendship just because we have differing opinions. We might understand, but in the end of the day, and I say this probably on almost every episode now, every single one of us has way more in common than we do that is different. And that's what we need to start embracing.
Love it.
Yep.
Love what
So
you're doing here, Nathan.
thank you, Phil. I'm so glad that you came on. And Phil, don't worry, since we're both Ohio boys, you are more than welcome back on the show anytime. So
You know what? Let's do that. Let's do
yeah,
that.
because I
We'll
think
celebrate the Guardians winning the World Series, maybe.
that would be nice. I mean, you know how we are with Cleveland championships around here. They tell us not to hold our breath because we would die. Especially if you look at the Cleveland Browns, which, I just absolutely hate to love. And it's been my team growing up. And I'm like, boy, you want to talk about unnecessary stress, Phil. Don't be a Browns fan. Let me tell you.
We'll save them for another day.
Yeah, we will. Well, excellent. Phil, I want to thank you so much for joining us today. And I just want to make sure that we have this while you're on here, but your website is philbarth.com. Is that correct?
That is
And
correct.
That will lead all of our listeners to where they can buy your books, more information about you, and even contact you if maybe they want to book you for a speaking engagement or something in the future. By all means, go to philbarth.com. Also, you can go to justadudepodcast.com, and Phil will have a guest page there, which will have his lovely photo on it, as well as all his links and social media contacts as well. So our listeners can go there. But yeah, Phil, thank you so much for joining me. What an incredible journey we've taken today with Phil Barth. From turning a heart attack into a heart of inspiration to using humor and creativity to manage stress and spark innovation, Phil has shown us that every challenge can be an opportunity for growth. If you're feeling inspired or have your own story to share, connect with Phil through his website, philbarth.com, or check out his social media for more motivation and creativity. Remember, life's too short to be stressed out, so why not lighten up to level up? Thanks for listening to Just a Dude podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Leave us a review if you feel moved to do so, and let us know what guest you'd like to hear from next. Until next time, keep being just a dude or a dudette, living life on your own terms. Catch you later.